stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A big crowd tonight. All right, we'll jump down to proclamations and presentations. First up, we have Chief Watts with recognition of John Irons for 46 years of service.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Councilors. If I could call John Irons up. John Irons was hired by the Stillwater Police Department on January 28, 1974. John served as a patrol supervisor, traffic coordinator, and staff services training sergeant. He was promoted to the rank of lieutenant before retiring on October the 5th, 2001 to fill a vacancy in the Stillwater City Jail as the position of jail supervisor. John served as the jail supervisor for 18 years before retiring on December 31st, 2019. The City of Stillwater is eternally grateful to John for 46 years of dedicated service to the citizens of Stillwater. I'd like to present John with this plaque in appreciation. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words, John?
Let me just say that I've enjoyed working here for the City of Stillwater, and this has been something that when you can come to work and you can leave after 46 years with a smile on your face, you know that it's got to be something right in who your employers are, and I appreciate that very much and hope to serve the City of Stillwater continually as I leave today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your service. All right, that takes us down to item 4 on the consent docket. Tonight on consent, we have approval of our regular meeting minutes and a number of plans that are required for application for federal grant funding. Councilors, any questions, comments, or motions on the consent docket?
Motion to accept the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the consent docket is approved. Just double checking to see if we've got anybody signed up to speak on items not here for public hearing, but I think they all are. All right, that takes us down to item 7, public hearings. I think that's why most of you are here. We're glad you are. Item 7A, receive public comment regarding a request from Beta Psi of Gamma Phi Beta Inc. for a map amendment to rezone property at 302 South Walnut Street from RSS Small Lot Single Family Residential to O Office. This is CC-20-06. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this item?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gross.
Yes, good evening. Let's see, Lance Gross with the Community Development Department. And just to kind of give you a little brief background as to the 2 applications that we have before you tonight. Let's see, the first one is a map amendment, and it's basically requesting a rezoning from RSS to O. The second one is for a SUP, a specific use permit. These 2 cases are related, but I'll go ahead and get started with the map amendment. The purple boundary on the map indicates the subject site, and you can see it's currently zoned RSS. And RSS is located to the north, to the south, and also to the west. The Westwood overlay is located over to the west of the subject site. RMI is located to the east, And just to kind of give you a little reference, Tower Park is right here, and that's Zone P. This is a clean version of the map. You can see Tower Park is right here. The subject site is right here. 3rd Avenue terminates into Walnut. University is up here running east and west. And 4th Avenue is down here. And if you look at this location right here, this highlighted area, it is a PUD that was approved approximately in 2011, and it was for a surface parking lot. And essentially what the applicant is wanting to do now is to have a surface parking lot on this site right here. Back in 2011, there was not a restriction for the size of the lots. So a PUD could come in and do one back then, but now there's a one acre minimum restriction. So they could not apply for a PUD for this one.
Lance,
Yes.
is there a parking lot at that southern location?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is. Yeah. And this is a bird's eye view looking to the northwest. The area highlighted is the subject site. South Walnut is right here. University is right here, and 3rd Avenue is right here. This is a view looking to the west from 3rd Avenue. Essentially, the house would be removed and a parking lot for approximately 13 spaces would be installed. So, I'd like to now have Kelly Harris come up and explain the application.
Good evening, Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the owners tonight. We understand that this rezoning and the associated SUP request is coming to you tonight with a recommendation of denial from Planning Commission. This was based on a 3-2 vote of the commissioners. We ask for you to consider this project as it is an associated use for high-density residential, which is what the comprehensive plan designates this area as. Tonight, we're requesting the office zoning with an SUP. This would lock in a use and a layout so that everyone knows what's going to be constructed. We want to be upfront with our proposed use of the property, and an SUP is the only way to do that. As you heard Lance just go over, the PUD process is not available to us anymore. Our property is 50 foot wide and 136 feet deep. With the required building setbacks in the office district, this would leave room for a 20-foot wide building. And that 20 foot is further reduced by 6 feet every story over the first story. So any building proposed on this tract of land would need to acquire additional property to make a building work. And that property would then need to be rezoned, so there would not be any change of use on this property without additional public hearings. Parking lots are normally associated with a primary structure. In populated areas like around downtown and especially around campus, the need for standalone parking lots is high. There's already a parking lot on the block to the south, as Lance mentioned previously. This parking lot has been there since 2011. Several of the surrounding properties appear to be owner-occupied, according to the county assessor's website. It does not appear to have been detrimental to the survival of the neighborhood to the west. The zoning on the east side of Walnut from that parking lot is a lower multifamily zoning classification than the area to the east of our site. The higher density areas are in need of parking lots as well. This sorority happened to be lucky enough to find a property within half a block of their main house. This will ensure that their residents will actually park there instead of on the street. Additional traffic was a concern of the neighbors to the west. Traffic will not be increased due to this proposed parking lot. Due to the proximity of their main house, these ladies are driving down the street anyway. Now they'll be able to park off the street, therefore reducing street congestion. Also, the parking lot has been designed in such a way that the residents will not have to back into the street to leave the parking lot. This is even more important since the property is located at an intersection. The comprehensive plan indicates high-density residential, which is what is located on the east side of Walnut. Parking lots are an associated use for high-density residential. This property is surrounded by a mix of residential properties. As Lance went over, to the east is RMI with the lower zoning RTM to the south of that. To the northeast is public, west is RSS with the Westwood overlay. And then to the north and south on this block is RSS, but on this block, there is not one house that is owner occupied, so they're essentially being used as low-density multi-family housing. The owners to the west do have a built-in buffer to this half of the block. Our lot, as I mentioned, is 136 feet deep. The properties to the west are 200 feet deep. This puts the backs of their homes 130 feet away from the shared property line. This is not an instance where backyards are only 20 feet deep. Yes, what we are proposing is different than the rest of the block, but it's not unique to the area and certainly not unique around town. This neighborhood alone has 3 other parking lots that back up to homes. My mother-in-law lives in West Park, which is on the west side of town. It backs up to several parking lots, and homes there don't stay for sale for long. It is also typical to find transition zones and uses located at intersections. This property is located at the intersection of 3rd and Walnut. Tree canopy was also a concern that we heard at Planning Commission, and I hate to address this as it never makes neighbors very happy. I always caution clients from counting on something that they don't own. Trees are one of those items. Between not having to pull a city permit to remove a tree and our weather, counting on your neighbor's trees to be there isn't always advised. The proposed site plan and stormwater drainage plans have been accepted by city staff. We're not requesting any exceptions to the code, and we are decreasing the flow of stormwater from our site in every direction by providing detention in the parking lot. We are proposing a 6-foot-tall wood screening fence. This is the typical fence found in residential areas, including this area. However, we would be happy to construct an 8-foot fence to provide more of a buffer for sight lines. We will not be installing any lighting on the site, so no additional lights will be shining on anyone's property. There is an existing street light at the intersection, which will provide the safety lighting for our property. We have proposed planting some shrubs along the front property line to satisfy the required landscape requirements. However, we would be happy to plant a tree in the front instead. As far as the project opening the door for future parking lots, each one would have to come before you to request a rezoning and/or an SUP. You can make certain requirements, such as lighting that doesn't bleed off the property, 8-foot-tall neighborhood fencing, or trees to be planted. Everyone that spoke against this project at Planning Commission was from the neighborhood to the west. There weren't any neighbors from the north or south. The owners of this property specifically didn't purchase a property in the Westwood Overlay District. This property does not fall under any of their requirements. This property is in a transition area to higher density that is located on the east side of Walnut, and a parking lot is a natural associated use to that multifamily. I would like to reserve some time to come back up and answer any questions at the end of the public input time. But do you have any questions for me now?
Counselors? Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
This time I will open the public hearing. We do have a number of folks signed up to speak, and I'm going to just go in the order I've got them here. First up, we have Bob Grallman.
That was quick. I want to commend the previous speaker for the choice of color tonight. I think that we can offer you an honorary membership for that if you want. Hello, I'm Bob Grallman, 2224 Sunset Drive, where my wife, Diane, and I have resided for nearly 40 years now. And what I want to do tonight is to go over the history of our neighborhood association briefly to remind you what Stillwater very nearly lost and suggest what is required to maintain a positive environment. That is, a walking and largely family-oriented area next to a wonderful major university and surrounding a beautiful new home for one of the top 100 schools in the entire nation. All of that is impressive, but all can be lost quickly without sustained effort and support, especially with city government, especially in cooperation with city government. Nearly 20 years ago, Diane and I and many others, some in this room, were involved in a citywide campaign to establish a reasonable approach to community life. A few measures involving parking and maximum occupancy that seemed and still does a reasonable way to enhance town progress. That measure fell hard, thanks to many who felt otherwise. Later, of course, the conservation overlay approach was conceived and approved unanimously by your predecessors. Had that not taken place, it is near certain that the quality of the community between Western and OSU would have taken a dramatic downturn. And now you would likely be making difficult decisions similar to those made surrounding the rest of the campus, some of which have had to be torn down. Thanks to those measures and continued support by the city, all agree the situation has stabilized after years of uncertainty, and most impressively brought more families in as well as more opportunities to interact with students who remain a significant and enjoyable presence in our area, as well as hosting events such as the annual high school concert in Ingham Park. But it's not easy. For all those years, Westwood residents have been expected to monitor rules and violations and report them to the city. Not exactly a pleasant task, but worth it. What we know and have experienced routinely is probing by developers, working around the edges to see if there's perhaps a weakness that can benefit them or the groups they represent. Usually, alas, only a short-term fix. You've heard of several of those over the years, similar to what you are now considering. It's not, as the current case, just the narrow confines of the area that can signal our alarm. Neighborhoods decline when boundaries also come under scrutiny, such as the ongoing construction on Admiral Street and the current proposal and others as well. These forays, I love that word forays, I just had to throw it in. I think these forays threaten neighborhoods unless resolved carefully, especially to protect current occupants, instead of embracing ideas that have little staying power. I urge you to approach this vote with the same sense of responsibility and pride of that long ago council vote. By so doing, they made their mark for an historic area of Stillwater and confirmed a sense of what's healthy, right, and enviable for visitors. Now, I happen to know a bit about our city's public schools, and I think I speak for many that driving past legendary Westwood School remains a great pleasure, a symbol of Stillwater's reputation as the education community for Oklahoma. Without the efforts of many to carve out the overlay and manage it in partnership with the city, that school would likely not have remained where it is as the neighborhood declined. Now it's up to you to retain that sort of wisdom that the council felt when it passed the measure and to continue to protect it, even when on its fringes for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Next up, we have James Beckstrom.
James Beckstrom, 2218 West 4th Avenue, Stillwater. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a parking study many years ago that Stillwater sponsored. And that study, actually a report was prepared. Got this is off of stillwater.org, so this is available to everybody. And it talks about solutions to the parking problem within the Greek community. That was one of the focus areas of that study. And the reason I'm here is that taking houses and tearing houses down was actually not one of the dozen or more recommended solutions for the parking problem in the Greek area. So it's a little bit striking that our parking consultant and the study that we participated in as citizens and the city participated from a government perspective, not one of those solutions recommended tearing houses down. In fact, that study specifically said that parking lots are bad for neighborhoods. And so to not see evidence of a unified solution within the Greek community to solve their parking problem, but instead pick away at the neighborhoods of Stillwater to solve their problem in a piecemeal way, is really against the wisdom that we saw in this report that was prepared many years ago. Not many years ago, it was 2000, I can't remember what it was. 2013, okay. Interestingly, 2 years after the parking lot was put in just east of our neighborhood. So I ask that you consider the wisdom of the parking study. There are solutions, I think unified solutions. I've seen no evidence that there's been a pursuit of a parking district. There are other legal measures that the Greek community can take to solve its parking problems in a unified way, and there really hasn't been any evidence of that being pursued. And I would just ask that you help us preserve our neighborhoods. Just because there's not a family in that house today doesn't mean there's not going to be a family in that house tomorrow. And we've got a beautiful school just 2 blocks away for them to use. So anyway, I ask that you consider voting no for this because I think in general it's bad for the neighborhood, it's bad for the community to convert properties like this to parking lots. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Next up, we have Tanya Nash.
Hi. Can you all hear me? I'm probably
You can
very
pull that just a
short.
little closer there.
Yes?
There you go. Yep.
So my address is 1625 West University. My house is one of those directly affected by this proposed rezoning. I spoke at the last meeting against this. I will speak again. I would just like to add that the representative of the construction company is quite correct that this is a border zone. To the south, it is multifamily. It isn't residential there. That's why to us this block is so important. It is the first residential block, and that residential then continues on. So yes, currently it is not under the Westwood overlay, but we who live here, my backyard is within 300 feet of this. To us, this is crucial, that it is a family neighborhood. We would like to work to make the park nicer. We have plans to make the park nicer. We would like to help this street rise up and be nicer and be better. That's our aim. And we would like to work together with the Greek community to help them find solutions because we understand they just want to park their cars. But to us, it's a threat. We work really hard to make this an excellent neighborhood for our children. Many of you know me from Boy Scouts. We try super hard to preserve the historic houses, to preserve the neighborhood for the children, to host everyone at homecoming, to host the concerts in the little libraries, to be what we want to show our children that Stillwater is. A place where we do what's right for the community. What I'd like to talk about, though, however, is money and taxes. I pay a lot of money in property taxes, and I am happy to do that because that money is, as Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said, taxes are what we pay for civilization. That money goes to the excellent schools and to you guys and to all these things. Maybe you don't get paid, I don't know, but to the city government. And that's important to me, and I'm happy to pay those taxes. If this parking lot goes through, not only will my property value fall, my property taxes will fall, and so will everyone else's in the overlay. So the city is actually cutting down then quite significantly, because how do they price houses? Comparables, right? So all of Westwood will fall, all of the property taxes will fall. What taxes is the sorority paying? My understanding is they are paying no taxes. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that sororities and fraternities and universities do not pay taxes. So I would ask you, even if it weren't a case of many, many, many families against 14 parking spots, I would ask you to consider, what are you doing to your bottom line with this parking lot? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Brenda Masters.
Good evening. I'm Brenda Masters. My address is 221 South Orchard. My backyard isn't 300 feet from this proposed parking lot. It's 0 feet. And I know it's already been said that we have deep backyards. That's part of the value of those properties. I would like to ask that you vote against this rezoning because Stillwater has had enough destruction of its residential areas. You can drive around town with people who haven't visited Stillwater for 3 or 4 years, and they're aghast at what we've already done. You also can go down the block, 1 block, to the parking lot that's already there, and you can feel that there isn't a feeling of neighborhood there. You can say that nothing's changed, but there isn't a neighborhood there. It's a parking lot. And furthermore, it has about 25 slots. I could be wrong about that, 20 to 25. And I've taken pictures of that parking lot weekly for over a year, and I've never seen more than 5 cars in there. So the regrettable part is we can build these parking lots, but students will park where it's most convenient. And already the Greek houses have identified other parking options. One of the Greek houses bought all their parking spots in the high-rise at Wentz Hall, or the Wentz Lane parking. That seems reasonable. Nothing was destroyed. I urge you to help us protect a residential area that's diverse and fragile and one of the last remaining residential areas anywhere near Stillwater campus. We appreciate your support.
Thank you. Next, we have Shelley Pulliam.
Good evening. I'm Shelley Pulliam. I'm the House Corporation President of Gamma Phi Beta. And from 1405 West 3rd in Stillwater. And I know you've heard a lot of reasons tonight on why to vote no. Let me share with you a few on why it's important to us. I know sometimes the Greek neighborhood gets a bad rap, and just like tonight saying we don't pay taxes and things like that. But I hope that you will notice how much the Greek neighborhood hampers the city of Stillwater. We bring in tons of revenue through our events and our hard work, like Homecoming and Mom's Weekend and Spring Sing and recruitment. Our girls and those of the fraternities participate in social work throughout the community of Stillwater that comes alongside organizations that make a difference. Gamma Phi Beta is here tonight because of a city zoning ordinance that requires us to have 1 parking spot per bed. We're also here tonight because Gamma Phi Beta, we have parking, but we rent our annex to Alpha Xi Delta sorority, so we also have to provide parking for an additional sorority. So I actually represent 2 sororities tonight. A lot of thought went into purchasing this property. We have tried for many years. We've looked at options, and we felt this was a good fit because there was already parking lots on that corridor. It is close in proximity to our house. We can rent parking from the university, but do you know how far our girls have to walk at night? That is a safety issue we are not willing to examine. Our girls' safety is more important than anything else. We certainly understand the concerns voiced by the Westwood neighborhood. We additionally, like I said, we petitioned for a multi-use zone when we heard that they were concerned about anything going in there. We withdrew our petition and came back with this because it gave parameters. We knew they were concerned about the views from Walnut, so we're willing to put in the 8-foot fence. We've had people mention the trees behind us. We only have 2 trees on our property. The rest don't belong to us and will remain. So there is still an obscure view from Walnut. And then we've talked about the distance between our property and the back of those houses. I was surprised that Walnut, until I did my research, I was surprised that Walnut was considered part of the Westwood neighborhood because the corridor of Walnut from 6th to University actually seems to belong more to the Greek neighborhood and that than it does to the residential. There's 3 apartment complexes, 9 multifamily townhouse units, 3 parking lots, and many homes that are rental properties to college students. If I lived in the house behind the property, I would prefer a parking lot over rental to college students with not having control. I know because I live in a neighborhood where college students rent the house next to me, and I can tell you it's quite interesting. Gamma Phi Beta, we are doing our due diligence to do what the city requires of us and to also have respect for our neighbors to Westwood. We have tried everything we can to accommodate, and this will be a parking lot with a high privacy fence that's maintained, that has landscaping, and we will maintain it quite well, and our girls will be safe. And I thank you for your consideration of the change in the zoning request.
Thank you. The last person I have signed up is Jonathan Rogers.
Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Johnny Rogers. I live at 1902 West University. I got to do a little adjustment here. Okay, so I was Greek. I lived here for 20 years. I've been a corporation board president, and I feel bad for the Gamma Phi's, actually. I mean, that's a bad situation they're in. I mean, they're building this. You guys are building onto your house, right? Yeah. So they're building onto their house. They don't have adequate parking. They're trying to solve the problem. Well, this problem has been in existence in Stillwater for a long time. And the university has grown exponentially and will continue to grow. And the issue really, to me, is, I mean, this helps Gamma Phi. I would argue, and I don't know if they have a spot for every bed now, these 13 spots, but I would argue probably it doesn't, or if it's a temporary fix to an ongoing issue that they're going to continue to have. But again, you know, this is the interest of one party, and long term, you're still going to have other organizations that are growing that do a lot for Stillwater, do a lot for Oklahoma State University, and it's not solving the problem for them. So if the parking lot gets built, you know, we're also talking about a zoning change, and so, you know, our neighborhood is going to, that I live in, is going to have to come down here because we'll be open for business at that point on the street, and people will take, you know, people will apply for different uses for that land, and the interest of the neighborhood and the surrounding area will be forever changed. It may not happen overnight, but we'll have interested parties outside of Gamma Phi trying to change that area, good, bad, or indifferent. That's what's going to happen. But again, we'll still be stuck with the problem that we have, and that's there's no parking for this growing area of campus. So the greater good here is, to me, do something as a community that's going to fix the problem, that's going to bolster the university, the Greek kids, and is going to preserve the neighborhood. I think that's really the vision that you guys need to have as a council. I think that's the purpose of the council. It's a tough decision, and appreciate what you guys do, but I urge you to vote no on this issue, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else signed up. If anybody thinks they signed up or wanted to sign up and didn't, speak now or forever hold your peace. Did you sign?
I did not sign up, but when I went back out there, I wasn't the person to sign up. So my name's Gabriel Cook. This is my family back here. We live at 301 Orchard. which is directly behind the property that's under consideration for rezoning. I've already been down here twice to discuss this issue and to give my point of view. And I appreciate my neighbors who have taken the time to be here and in some cases spoken on behalf of that change, and I do appreciate them for being here. We've got a good community going on right there in Westwood. I've lived here for 5 years. We bought our house 4 years ago in that neighborhood at that spot. And at the time, I never imagined I'd have to come down here and protect my backyard and the back of my house from a group that wanted to put a parking lot there. Okay, I've got a 2-story house, and you can see the picture of the house when you look at the aerial view there. And a 6-foot fence, an 8-foot fence, a 10-foot fence is not going to provide the privacy that I deserve to have at my property there. Okay, as we've said before, and people on both sides have admitted that there's a huge parking problem, and I don't think it's our responsibility to help them find parking spots for their expanding growth over there. Okay, we've got a really nice neighborhood there, and we're trying to preserve it. And I think, as the last speaker said, I feel bad for those girls. They need to have a place to put their cars. Okay, but I believe that's something that they need to work out with the university. They provide a lot of money for the university. They do a lot of recruiting to get girls to come to the university. And so it would make sense to me that they work with the university to find a way to provide parking for those girls, whether on university property or in another area that's not going to affect a neighborhood that we're trying to preserve over there on that side of Stillwater. Okay, I think our neighborhood, as people have said, we're trying to do good for this city and try and provide a place for families like my own to come and feel like we live in a community where everyone's taking care of each other. Okay? And so I urge you guys to take care of this city, to take care of my neighborhood, and vote no on this rezoning, if you would. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. All right. At this point, I will close the public hearing, and I will ask Lance to come back up and let us know about the Planning Commission's decision or recommendation on this issue, although we have already discussed that.
Yes, the Planning Commission made a recommendation for a denial vote by 3-2.
Thank you, Lance.
Yes.
Councilors, any questions for staff at this point on this issue? Before we get too far into discussing it, this is a zoning request from RSS to office. The actual specific use permit would only be applicable if office zoning is actually granted. Is that?
That's correct.
My understanding as well is that on issues of zoning, our job is to discuss the zoning classification and not the specific project that is being discussed. Zoning is a big picture matter. There's a lot of things that can go into office zoning. If we change zoning from one classification to another, this parking lot may not necessarily be the thing that ends up there. We've had this come up in other cases in the city where we've rezoned with at least the indication certain projects were going to happen there. When it was rezoned, the owners sold it and something else happened there. I'm not suggesting that that's at all what's possible here, but I'm saying from our standpoint, from our consideration, we have to consider the zoning standing alone and not the specific project until we actually get to the specific use permit discussion. So I would just remind us as a council that our focus in deciding this needs to be on the zoning use itself and not on the specific project. So, questions or comments, councilors?
Lance, can you bring up the map, the current zoning map as it stands right now, please?
Yes.
So we're RSS, so residential small to the north, south, and west.
And as I'm looking at it right now, there are no current office zonings within the delineations of that map right now, correct?
Yeah, just to clarify that, the parking lot to the south that was discussed, that's a PUD within the RSS zoning?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's an RSS PUD.
And the reason that we're requiring an SUP for this is because the current zoning designations require an acre for
a PUD.
For a PUD.
For a PUD.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
Well, I'll jump in with a couple of comments. I've been taking notes up here. There's a couple things I would like to address just based on what speakers were talking about. First, I want to talk about the property tax issue, more from a general, I think, education standpoint than anything else. We were just talking about this. I was talking about this with Councilor Jaleski before the meeting. The city of Stillwater doesn't collect property taxes. And so our funding is sales tax based only. So not that it matters to this discussion or this decision from my standpoint at all, but just sort of to make sure this is something we talk about with the public a lot. The city does not collect property taxes for general government purposes. And so the idea that one property use over another property use would make a difference for our bottom line is not the case, and certainly wouldn't be a matter for us to make a decision like this based on which property tax or which property value would be higher. I do think that the girls at the sorority spend a lot of money at stores in town as well as the neighborhoods, and that's where we really care. I would love for you guys to shop local, spend your money here so we collect the sales tax revenue. A couple other items that I took notes on here. Around the Westwood neighborhood, I appreciate you all being here. I appreciate you all coordinating so we know who you are. The Westwood neighborhood overlay has boundaries, and I appreciate the fact that you all care about the encroachment getting close to that. But of course, I think we all have to recognize that overlay is the overlay, and it doesn't extend beyond the overlay, right? And so, while I care about the idea of encroachment, I also think it's important to make sure that we don't treat the areas surrounding the neighborhood overlay as if they're in the overlay. If it needs to be expanded, that's a different discussion, but I don't personally feel like the neighborhood overlay itself should influence what happens next door. I do understand the argument that there is some encroachment concern that you have there, but it's an overlay for a reason and it has boundaries. So my concern really here is what's the benefit, is office zoning a beneficial use of this property? Is it, conform with the nature of the surrounding properties? Does it make sense to put an office zoning in the middle? I think in our packet we've got the other uses that office zoning could be used for: churches and religious institution, educational services, child's care services, financial institutions. An office zoning here would allow for a wide variety of uses in the middle of this neighborhood. It seems out of place to me to say, we're going to take the middle of this block and there's houses all around and we're going to just put an office zoning here. Given again, when we change zones, all of those things become as of right uses, and even if I like the idea of a parking lot here, I've got to think about the fact that it's not necessarily always going to be a parking lot. I don't like the idea of rezoning this lot in the middle of this neighborhood because of the sort of spot isolated nature of it. It doesn't seem like a good fit. It doesn't seem like it would be long-term beneficial to the street itself or to the neighborhood around it. That's my consideration at this point. I do have some more things to say about parking and parking lots in the area, but I'm going to hold off on that for now.
Can I talk about
Absolutely.
parking? Yeah. It's interesting, the things that we've had come up before us for several weeks. Every objection has to do with cars and traffic. We have too many cars. I'm primarily interested in the efforts that the community and the sorority have made together to solve this issue. Have you met together No. Okay. I had the same reaction, I think, as the mayor. The overlay is the overlay, and what's outside of the overlay is outside of the overlay. I also have the problem with the rezoning something in the middle of RSS. And I understand how difficult it is to find a place to park. There has to be some meta answer to this. Both of you have really important and serious problems. Is there any other way to get together and rethink this? And that's not our job up here right now. But those are the things that are going through my head. I just, everybody has a compelling argument.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that aside to echo some of the comments regarding the existing boundaries of the overlay districts as they stand right now. I agree that the boundaries were made, for better or worse, they are what they are right now. And I think that we have to use that as our guide when we talk about any changes that go on either inside the overlay or adjacent to the overlay. Those are two very different things. Having said that, I tend to agree also that this office zoning, again, that's why, Lance, I had you pull up the map. There's not another office zoning or any kind of non-residential zoning currently within the boundaries of that map that was shown. And so for that reason, I don't know that an office zoning fits very well with the current cohesiveness of the structures and the zoning that's currently there. Overlay to me is not so much of an issue, honestly, at this point, but the bigger question of does this zoning make sense in the current area? And I'd have a hard time arguing at this point that it does. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
I agree. The fact that we're in the middle of a block here, it seems like a spot zone that doesn't really make a lot of sense with the rest of the area. It's hard to even just to picture that zoning just kind of placed right there. It just seems very arbitrary with the rest of the block. So I agree. I question why the overlay. Did the overlay actually end in it bifurcated that block?
Yes, the overlay terminates right there at mid-block.
That's
Yes.
interesting. I'm sure there was probably a good reason. It's interesting to see it bifurcated that way because certainly what would happen on the back side of that block would impact the folks on the other side.
Exactly.
Maybe something to consider for the overlay down the road.
Okay, councilors, is there a motion on the item before us, which is the Planning Commission's recommendation that we deny the map amendment?
I will make a motion to kind of go along with the Planning Commission's recommendation to deny the rezoning request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the Planning Commission recommendation and deny the map amendment. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that motion is approved. Lance, on the matter of the SUP, do we just strike it? Do we have to have the hearing?
So it's a moot point.
Okay. I would like, if I can, just at this point, to talk a little bit about the parking issues and the issue of the Greek neighborhood and the family neighborhoods that surround it. I will say first that there was a hint of some that's in the discussion, this idea of maybe the Greek neighborhood versus the family neighborhoods, or there's some rivalry in this area, and I won't deny that that's potentially the case at some level, right? I mean, there is a somewhat differing populations that live on either side of Walnut Street, really. But I think this is I don't feel like this is a real a battle that people want to fight or feel like needs to be fought. I think people want to cooperate here, and that we need to find ways, as the Vice Mayor said, to figure out a better solution to this problem. As Mr. Rogers said and Jim Beckstrom pointed out, the parking situation around the Greek neighborhood and around the university in general is a problem and has been a problem for a long time. This parking lot wouldn't fix it. Not giving you this parking lot isn't going to fix it for sure. I think we do need to, and I will work on this going from here, to get a group together from the university, from the Greek neighborhood, and from the city to figure out what the heck we're going to do with parking in the area, because it is a mess. And the solution to this point from the Greek community has been to find lots to build parking on, and it seems like it's probably the only one that seems viable from the Greek community's perspective. I think we all appreciate the Greek community. We appreciate the university community in Stillwater. I love that neighborhood. I lived down there when I was in college. And so there is a better long-term solution to this, and we do have the responsibility to try to figure out what that is, or at least to help facilitate finding what that is. And so, I will ask going forward for us to form up some kind of task force to figure this out, because this is a solution, as Mr. Beckstrom pointed out. We've done a parking study. When was that from? 2013. So we're 7 years in almost. It's time for us to actually look at some of that data and figure out how to solve this problem. I know that doesn't help now where you guys are, but we need a better long-term solution to this problem. So thank you all for being here. The community involvement, the people coming and letting us know how you feel about this is incredibly important. We don't know how to make these decisions if you don't, not that we know how to make them much better when you're here, but it does help to have input and people who come and pay attention and show up and let us know what you think. So thank you all for being here on that matter. Okay, so we will skip item B on the agenda, 7B, and we'll move to 8, general orders. Item 8A, approve budget amendment reflecting December 2019 donations to the Stillwater Public Library. Stacy Delano, how are you?
Very good, and hello to the councilors and mayor. Thank you for listening to our 3 budget amendments that we have tonight. I am Stacy Delano, the director of the Stillwater Public Library, and first on this evening agenda for the library is the library's monthly budget amendment, which reflects donations that were made in the past month. Looking at it, it shows that the donations in total for December were $11,943. 1,583 of those dollars were donated for designated projects, the largest of which includes the purchase of adult books. And $800 was given with an undesignated use, meaning that we can use it on selected projects through the year. $9,560 was donated from our very marvelous Friends of the Library group. And if you did not know this, the Friends of the Library derive their funding from their twice-a-year book sale and from the continuous book sale that we have at the library. Their donation will go into projects for children, teen, and adult programming, which generally is not budgeted for in our general city budget. I do want to do an aside, which is one of those programming opportunities is going to be Thursday from 5 to 7 at the library, when along with the Friends and the League of Women Voters, the library will host the legislative reception where citizens can come out and meet their state representatives and senator, as well as their the local officials through the community. You have a chance to speak with the legislators and the officials, ask them questions, and most importantly, share your opinion about our community. So we invite everyone to come out to that. At any rate, we ask that you all approve this budget amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Counselors? I will echo the legislative reception as a wonderful event. You get to go up and just talk to folks one-on-one if you want to, but then there's also a question and answer session with the state reps, and so it's a really great opportunity to get to know some of the folks who are helping make decisions for us.
It is. It's a really good way to keep your New Year's resolution to become more civically engaged.
Is there a motion on this item, counselors?
a motion to approve resolution. Are we going to do all three of them? No.
I think it's just the
one.
budget amendment on this
Just the
one.
budget amendment. CC-20-09.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that budget amendment is approved. That takes us down to item B.
My second budget amendment on the agenda is for our state aid grant from the Oklahoma Department of Libraries. Each year, public libraries are eligible to get funds from ODL as long as they meet a long list of requirements, which we did, as long as our funding source maintains or exceeds the level of budgeting provided the previous year, and we thank you because you did provide us with that funding, and as long as the state has sufficient funds. This year, the library qualifies to receive $19,752, which we'll be using for the purchase of things like electronic books, a large project in which we'll fix the call number scheme in our public or in our library catalog, which you may not know affects you, but as soon as it gets fixed, you're going to be very happy. We're also going to spend it on things like training and then other projects that we're determining right now. I do want to stress that it's nice to have this large amount of money that comes in. Unfortunately, regulations do not allow us to use that on infrastructure, any construction, the building, or the grounds. The budget amendment that we have tonight is for $17,777, or 90% of the total I gave you, as 10% will be held in reserve to make sure that the state agency doesn't have to give any money back to the state. So they hold on to that until their budget's sound. We request that you approve this amendment.
Counselors?
Motion to approve the budget amendment reflecting an increase in the state grant revenue account by $17,777.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the budget amendment. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that is approved.
Excellent, thank you.
Now item C.
And then the last budget amendment is the library's amendment for the acceptance of 2 grants related to the library's role this spring as Stillwater's Census Central, which we're proud to serve as. The library applied for and received $3,100 from the Oklahoma Department of Libraries and the Institute for Library Museum Services, and then an additional $2,000 mini grant from the American Library Association's Library Census Equity Fund. So I'm very excited because although many libraries in Oklahoma did receive the Oklahoma Department of Library grant, we were the only Oklahoma library to receive the ALA grant, and we were just one of 56 out of over 500 libraries that applied for it nationwide. So we're very excited. And I want to thank our marketing department because their label of us as Census Central, I think, was something that the grant makers really responded to. So the library really has 2 goals with the census this year and our part of it. One is to serve as the hub for the census. So we are the city's location for getting your answers about census questions that you have. And we're also the place to come if you need the technology or the direction and help to be able to use those devices so that you can fill out the census. In addition, we're serving another role, and that is we will be outreaching to traditionally harder to count populations so that we could encourage them to get counted as well. So we'll be working with over a dozen organizations throughout the community so that we can make sure that every single one of us gets counted regardless of whether you have transportation or whether you have a phone or whether you have a computer. We're going to be there and make sure that every one of us counts. The grant funds will be used to purchase tablets, phones, and to do marketing so that we can go to different locations that serve the harder to count populations. We will do sessions on dispelling myths about the census, answering common questions, and then, of course, providing the technology so that people can actually fill out the census. The library is very grateful to all of the representatives of the Payne County Complete Count Committee and the member organizations of this harder to count subcommittee that we have. So we ask that you approve the budget amendment accepting these grant funds so that we can get to work bright and early tomorrow morning.
That's fantastic. That's really good news. And really, if you haven't heard us talking about Census 2020, then you haven't been paying attention. But it's a really big deal, and the harder to count populations, and then also with it being online this year and people needing or can use online tools to complete it. It's great that the library will be that sort of central location where everybody can go.
It'll be easier for people to complete the census, but all the information coming out ahead of time can be a little bit hard to digest and raises a lot of questions. So we're there by phone, email, walk-in, whatever way to answer your questions to make it easier for you.
And then will there be like public sessions, like where you'll talk about how to complete the census, or like you said, the dispelling the myths and that sort of thing?
Most of our outreach efforts will do exactly what you're talking about, and it'll be outside of the library in different organizations throughout town. However, we will have a couple of in-library sessions where librarians will do the same, providing information, answering questions, and helping. We cannot fill out your census, but we can give you some direction on how to use the technology and provide you with the devices so that you can do so. In addition, we'll be doing things like providing internet access to anyone who has their census card, even if you may not qualify for a free library card, or even if perhaps you've had fines for years. Come in with your census card and you will still be able to use the computers to be able to complete the census.
It's Councilor Wedlake with all the fines, right?
I have 15 cents right now, I think, is what my balance is. So.
That's great. I mean, it's fantastic, and I mean, just to me, it highlights the fact that the library is more than just a place you go check out a book. It is an information hub, and it's a place where people can go learn important information about all kinds of stuff, and you guys are providing fantastic service in this specifically, but in all kinds of other areas as well. Any motions on this item?
Motion to approve the budget amendment reflecting funds received from the Oklahoma Department of Libraries and Institute for Library and Museum Services in the amount of $3,100 and the American Library Association's Library Census Equity Fund in the amount of $2,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that amendment is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you.
Item 8D, summary of civic input on the annual budget. Hello, Megan.
Good evening. Megan Pardue, Communications Coordinator. Let me fix the mic. After the city's finance department finalized the budget cycle, it was decided that marketing should present an annual overview of citizen input as the city enters its budget preparation phase. Marketing gathers input year-round through a variety of ways, including social media, community surveys, and our other civic engagement tools. This input, whether positive or negative, is always relayed to staff and management for consideration. It is often addressed on the spot with residents by working with city staff to develop solutions and answers. It is also shared with city management and city council in reports such as this one. The following input is not meant to be a complete list. However, this input is representative of common themes we observe throughout the year, and it could be considered useful during the budget preparation phase. You'll find screenshots of specific comments in the packet I've provided. I'll start with common themes we see through social media platforms. The big one is the push for improved transportation infrastructure. However, more specifically, we observe a lot of demand for left turn lanes on various roads, more potholes filled, and more bike lanes and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure.
Potholes filled, not potholes built, right?
Yes. Another common theme, yeah, that's true. Another common theme involves Stillwater's parks. We have observed notable community appreciation for the city's splash pads. Regarding animal welfare, there is a demand for a new shelter or structure and increased funding in general. Along the lines of economic development, there is support for more sit-down restaurants and diversity in local shopping. The Stillwater Regional Airport receives support from social media users and a push for more connections in airlines. I will now move into some results from our community surveys this past year and our Balancing Act submissions. In December, we surveyed 962 residents on the city's recycling services using FlashVote. Results from this survey showed that most respondents felt that Stillwater's continued recycling service is important to them. Main reasons for those who don't use the service include living in Stillwater's high-rise apartments. Most respondents indicated that they would be satisfied with changes in the service in order to keep it alive. In June, we surveyed 631 residents on transportation needs and priorities. Results from this survey showed that many residents feel unsafe biking or walking in Stillwater due to infrastructure needs. Respondents also indicated that they would be willing to prioritize repairing existing infrastructure over adding lanes or sidewalks. In May, 525 residents responded to our FlashVote survey on city finances. Results concluded that many residents felt there's a lack of education on the city's finances. In 2019, the city received 241 submissions through Balancing Act, which is an online platform that lets citizens submit their ideal version of the city's budget. Sales tax was the top revenue source that users increased, and it was also the top increased expense. Users primarily increased city spending on street, stormwater, and grounds maintenance and the fire department, and users primarily decreased spending on management support, airport, and recreation. This concludes my report on citizen budget input. Through this report, we aim to clarify and relay some common themes we observed through our platforms to be considered during the budget preparation phase. Moving forward, marketing and finance plan to implement this report as a yearly occurrence during budget preparation. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to any questions or suggestions.
Counselors?
I think it's interesting to note the increase in the number of participants over the time that you've done.
Yes,
FlashVote.
it's been great to see that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Amazing compilation of comments.
Thank you.
Took a lot of time to just type it in.
And just to note, too, that the more, we harp on this all the time, but the more responses we get, the better. And while that number seems to be increasing, we're usually in the 600s as far as respondents on these surveys. That represents roughly 1.5% of our city population. So, the more the better. So I urge you all to take part in these, the flash votes and the Balancing Act, because it really does help give us the data we need to make these decisions. So,
would you guess that everybody who answers these is listening now?
If there are 631 people listening right now, I'll consider that a win.
Well, maybe they're listening tomorrow. But everybody should
yeah,
send this to 5 of their friends.
Sure. Yeah, a tree. That's right. I also, just as an aside, kind of found it interesting that one of the top things that was requested was more airline services. However, in the Balancing Act, one of the top things that was decreased in terms of budget was the airport services.
Yes.
Just to outline some of the issues we deal with up here.
Those are different people.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
Different platforms.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you for your time.
I was going to, Megan, just comment that the city finance, the education one that we talked about from May, right, that we saw those numbers that people seem to want to see more, has in fact helped us in the sense that our marketing efforts around this budget cycle and around finances have been affected by what we saw in these survey results. I think that's important for us to note in the sense that we don't just collect this information and just throw it in a drawer, but actually do try to respond in meaningful ways. I think the comments about transportation and needed improvements, you noted that people were willing, from what we saw in the survey results, people are willing to spend more on repairing current infrastructure than on building new, which in our meeting on infrastructure here a couple months ago, we talked about Sanger Road and some other areas. We, I think, brought that up as something that we have heard from people, and that we would rather figure out ways to fix the stuff we have instead of adding additional lane miles at this point. And so I think it's important. We're trying to do more outreach, and we're trying to create more of these paths for people to give us their information. But we also want people to see and to know that it's being used, and we're actually trying to use this information to change the decisions that we make in line with what the city residents are telling us. So you and Sherry and the team in marketing and folks who get together to do this stuff are so vitally important in getting us this information and helping us see what's out there and what our citizens are talking about. And these tools have just been, I think, fantastic in terms of helping us do that. So thank you for all the work that you've done here.
I appreciate it.
I think, too, that it's been beneficial. It's our opportunity to hopefully give information to the public, but also receive information from them as well. I would never want that communication channel to be one way, right? It's not only for us to give that information, but also to get this information back from the public. I think the flash vote has been so helpful in that regard, and making that outreach not just a one-directional thing. I know it's been really beneficial as we've worked through the recycling task force. That information has been very helpful to the citizens that are working on that task force. And it is really great. I want to commend you just on this effort for this tonight, just to have all of this kind of compiled in one place and to remind us, we have made strides in this year, and that this is these are the kind of the word cloud that's coming from our community right now.
Can you imagine how long we'd be here if 962 people had 5 minutes to speak?
We'd love that,
Each.
but
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to item 8E, approve a request for a purchase of a new ladder truck for the Stillwater Fire Department. Chief Tom Bradley's here.
Just a big book of stuff we can go through, probably take an hour or so. A little humor aside, Mayor, councilors, thank you very much for taking time out tonight to listen to Stillwater Fire Department's request for a new ladder truck. As you're well aware of, the ladder truck that we currently have is about 23 years of age and was taken delivery in 1997 at the time. A little background on this, the City Council approved the purchase of the funding for a purchase of a new ladder truck for the 2020 budget year. Additionally, this unit has been scheduled for replacement. It's a 1997 105-foot aerial device that allows us to have a master stream at the end of the tip to affect suppression in defensive type fires, or to provide a water source inside of a high-rise building. When it's not equipped with a standpipe system, we can connect to it and then operate our hoses off of that inside a building at an elevated height. The Stillwater Fire Department will maintain the apparatus in a ready reserve status. The one that we're taking out of service will be left in a ready reserve status. Now that's important for us because if you have a ladder truck go down, you have a replacement ladder truck. But in addition to that, the Insurance Service Office, which gives us our public protection classification rating that affects our insurance rates for real property, we garner points for having something in reserve status, which is up to a half of a point. And that's pretty significant when we're looking at 4.5 points from going from a Class 2 to an ISO Class 1 rating. Excuse me, the allergies in my eyes. The following items were identified as minimum specification for the criteria. The single rear axle, currently our ladder truck that we have in service today has a tandem axle. We're going to ask to go to a single axle in the rear. The initial look at the contract, we looked at a 100-foot aerial with a 1,500 gallon per minute pump and a 5-person minimum cab. After the committee that was made up of senior officers of the Stillwater Fire Department took a look at that, they identified 3 manufacturers that met those minimum specifications: E1, Pierce Manufacturing, and Rosenbauer. Rosenbauer was removed from consideration because of the $1.4 million price tag, and Pierce Manufacturing was selected to look at further in depth because it has a 107-foot ladder length. It has a 100-foot horizontal reach, which is important when we're looking at water rescue and things like that. It has a 500-gallon water tank, and it also has the ability to what's called short jack in congested areas. Now, a ladder truck is much like a crane. It has stability arms that go out and it provides for a good stable platform that the ladder operates off of. This one has the ability to operate in all configurations under the short jacking, so we have it available in congested areas like the Trinity Rower, the sorority areas of town, and Oklahoma State University. Additionally, this truck has the ability to have a 2,000 gallon per minute pump, and also it has a greater tip capacity, 750-pound tip capacity in all configurations, including elevation and extension. The proposed funding for this ladder truck replacement comes from 4 different sources, and only 20% of it is being generated by the general fund. The general fire fund is the $200,000, which is the general fund. The rural fire fund, which is an enterprise fund that comes from the fire subscriptions that we sell for the contracts for the rural areas. And then we have an OSU donation of $200,000, and then we have the Payne County Fire Fund, which is a dedicated sales tax that provides support and funding for all of the fire departments located within Payne County. And those funds have already been encumbered if we receive the approval to continue to move forward on the purchase. Again, like I stated, currently our ISO public protection classification is a 2. We hope that this ladder truck would give us the opportunity to make a part of that 4.5 point difference to take us to the next level of an ISO Class 1. Currently, there's only about less than 200 fire departments in the United States that have an ISO Class 1, and only about 3 or 4 in the state of Oklahoma. We'd like to be the next one, and I think we're on the verge of making that change. With that being said, we have 4 options for you to consider tonight. Is the authorize the purchase and the signing of the documents for a new ladder truck from Pearson Manufacturing for the price of $992,239, or to defer the purchase to a future year, or to reject all the options and direct the staff to explore other options for the replacement of a ladder truck. I'd be more than happy to entertain any questions you may have for a replacement ladder truck.
Thank you, Chief. Counselors, any questions?
Chief, I do have one question. On the fire equipment page that has the prices listed, there are 2 options. Option 1 with prepayment discount and option 2 without prepayment discount. And the $992,000 is the without the prepayment discount?
Yes, ma'am. And speaking with the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Stillwater, for us to make a prepayment would be outside the scope of the laws for the state of Oklahoma. Therefore, we pay in the arrears, and so it's the $992, ma'am.
I figured there was some kind of problem like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Just so we're clear, state law is costing us 40 grand on this thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes, sir.
The CFO would never leave almost $40,000.
Oh, I know.
That wouldn't happen.
I don't doubt it. I'm sure if we could do it that way, we would.
One other thing about the purchase of this truck is there's multiple governmental entities that are dealing with this, and it gives you an opportunity to try your patience in dealing with the different rules that are associated with the different governmental agencies. I know Mr. Gorman met with the county attorney, and they had to work out some stuff to use county funds for something that's going to be titled under the city, and just a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with it. And the attorneys have been very gracious in providing some time for us. So,
Chief, I just have one kind of question for my own edification. What is the usual service life for one of these trucks? Because I drove a 2001 Honda Accord when I was in residency, and that thing barely made it down the highway. So just out of curiosity, how long are these usually in service?
Well, the National Fire Protection Association would recommend that all the trucks go out of service at the 25-year mark. We have a truck that's with the Stillwater Fire Department today that was purchased in 1991 by the E1 Manufacturing Corporation under Chief Jim Smith, and that truck meets its annual pump testing and certification on a regular basis. I would expect that the truck that we're taking out of frontline service will remain with Stillwater Fire Department in excess of another 10 or 15 years, providing that backup and that addition in case we have a major catastrophe where we have a large area of that we have to defend fire against.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Chief.
I think it's great that we've got multiple sources going in here, and despite the challenges of cooperating, this is the kind of equipment that will get wide use, not just here in Stillwater, but could potentially help other places.
I have one other item, Mayor, that I omitted and I passed over was this ladder truck is 141 inches in height, and the height of the door at Fire Station number 2 is 141 inches. So this truck will be placed in service at Fire Station 1 where our current ladder is. So down the road, if somebody says, well, why don't we put it at Station 2? We know that it's not going to fit through the hole at Station 2.
Thank you. Councilors, is there a motion on this item?
Motion to approve the purchase of a new ladder truck for the fire department from Pierce Manufacturing for the price of $992,239, utilizing the funding sources outlined by the chief previously, and approve the budget amendment reflecting OSU's $200,000 cost sharing.
Second.
Oh.
We have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the truck. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that item's approved. Chief, we've got you on for items 8F as well. Approve a budget amendment reflecting a donation received for the purchase of smoke detectors.
Yes, Mayor, if you'll bear with me just a minute, I've drag up my piece of paper here. So we received a $50 donation from a lady that lives in Lawton, Oklahoma. Her name is Wendy Tatrout, and she has a family that lives here in Stillwater. And if you'll indulge me, I just want to read a portion of her letter. I want you to know that the program served its purpose. Offer of the free detectors caused us to make it a priority to come by the station and pick them up. And before I had left Stillwater on Saturday, I had installed all of the detectors in my daughter's home. I left town knowing that she and her kids would be sleeping more safely from here on out. I appreciate the generous attitude and the kindness to the 2-year-old and 4-year-old on the day we stopped in. Encloses a check in the amount of $50 so that you can provide smoke detectors to other families in Stillwater. And that's something that we receive on a regular basis and we're extremely proud of. So tonight we're asking to accept that donation for the smoke detector program.
That's awesome. Thank you. Councilors?
Approve the budget amendment reflecting donation received by the fire department for the purchase of smoke detectors. And thanks to Wendy Tetrold.
That was a motion.
Yes, that's a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this budget amendment. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that is approved. Thank you, Chief. Item 8G, approve request for a Citizen Transportation Study Committee to assist city staff and consultants with identifying transportation projects. Mr. Monty Carnes.
Good evening, Monty Carnes, Director of Engineering, City Engineering. We have 3 projects of which we've talked in the past when we formed those about how it would be helpful to have input from the citizens on those committees. Those would be the Hudson Street Bike Corridor, the 6th Avenue Corridor, and the Southwest School Access Project. As we were starting to kind of put those together, we thought, you know, it would be easier if we just had one committee with subcommittees to manage those projects, be a little easier on staff. More importantly, we think there'd be some cohesion between the projects and uniformity. We like the way the recycling committee is working, and we thought that was an excellent method. And so that's what we've come to you tonight to ask, is to give us authorization to solicit citizens' participation in those 3 projects. We'd anticipate starting that this week, coming back to you on February the 3rd with a recommendation of names for you to appoint. Happy to answer any questions.
My only question here, Monty, would just be around the time frame, because I know like the 6th Avenue project is 3, 4, 5-ish years down the road. Do you foresee this sort of being a standing committee for a long length of time like that?
So I'm glad you mentioned that project. What we're looking for on that project is to study the entire corridor as to how we address the connectivity issues from north to south. ODOT has selected their consultant. We would work with that consultant. They've pledged that to us to make sure that as that project is designed and constructed, we don't inadvertently create a barrier that's going to be very expensive to solve sometime in the future. The current configuration of 6th Avenue was established over 50 years ago. So what happens now is going to be there for another 50 or 60. So we think we just take a deep breath, look at it. What should the streetscaping look like? What type of development would be good along that area? How can we soften it? How can we improve access across it? So we want that committee to help us look at those, to actually start from scratch and develop what the request for qualifications and proposals should be, and get the consultant and then move on. That would take however long it would take.
That's good. I mean, we're staying in front of that, getting in front of that project and making that planning.
That would be the plan. Yes, sir.
Monty, you mentioned that ODOT already has selected their consultant.
That's correct.
So our 6th Avenue Corridor Subcommittee would be developing a criteria for our consultant?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
To work in.
Exactly what do we want our consultant to be looking at? What qualifications do we want?
Okay.
And then helping determine which
So
ones meet.
we have a consultant and ODOT has a consultant.
That's correct. And their
Okay.
consultant, of course, is designing the roadway. Ours could be less engineering and more land use, active transportation. You know, how do we accommodate active transportation? Do we have separate corridors and those types of things?
I guess I just maybe want one more point of clarification. So a subcommittee for 6th Avenue specifically would or would not be potentially advising on what 6th Street ultimately will look like. So the road, ODOT has already got their road.
ODOT is very receptive to working with this and how that corridor should function in the future, and making sure that we don't, or they don't do anything, or jointly we don't do anything to restrict us from doing something in the future.
Do we have time? I mean, so ODOT's engineer will work, what, to 30% plans?
Yes, and they're in the process of doing their survey and those types of things. So we do need to move quickly, but we're not too late yet to have some of that input.
I think one of the things that's been really effective about the recycling task force is that we kind of started with some parameters and goals in mind that had some specific input points. I would encourage us, obviously there's some that's already built in specifically for 6th Street to make sure, you know, when we ask, I've been so impressed with our recycling task force. They've put themselves out there to participate a lot. I think, but they understand that there's going to be, that we're listening to their input and that there's kind of an end result of their input. I think when we ask our task forces to have this input, we just want to make sure that we're putting them in at the right time, that they actually can make an impact with all the time that they're devoting to that volunteer spot. So I would encourage us to make sure that that happens.
You've seen that same influence to cost curve that I've seen, that the earlier you get the input, the more you're able to affect the cost of a project. And yes, we think that's very important as well.
Well, I think our community feel that their time has been valued, and they really have, it's important, I think, right?
Exactly.
Do you have a number in mind in terms of how many folks on each of these subcommittees?
Well, we would think there would, likely, by the time you get representation of all the affected stakeholders, you're going to have 6 or 7 on 8 on each subcommittee. So then you're going to want, some kind of a steering committee, executive committee. So we're thinking, 30 people. Would not be unrealistic.
Sure. Seems like something that might attract as many or more folks as the recycling committee has. So.
Can you explain
Roads?
really quick the idea of a subcommittee? So will they meet wholly as a transportation committee at any point, or would that be a...
I think there would be value in that. I think that's also something that we want to hear from, likely the group that'll be kind of steering the committees, and take some direction from them. And we want to give some guidance, but at the same token, we want to value folks' input as to what they think the direction it should go as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that'd be a kind of a discussion. Once we get the committee formed, we'll have some definite timelines when we're going to need input, and then as a group work towards that.
I actually really like the idea of having everyone under an executive committee. I think way too often we've just done piecemeal projects or piecemeal input, and although these are separated geographically, looking at transportation overall as a starting point anyway is a really good idea.
Yeah, I think that gives us the best chance to look at it holistically and be consistent across the community as to what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So I would just, I guess, point out here that these are fairly specific projects that we want to garner input on.
Yes.
And overall, we want a general transportation policy. This isn't going to be just a group that gets together and talks about the problems with streets in Stillwater.
This will be an opportunity to roll up your sleeves and get to work.
Absolutely. Which is great. I mean, and I know there are a number of folks on these projects specifically that have asked me questions about what the plan is, and so I think there are a number of folks who want to be involved and want to help roll up their sleeves and get to work. So at this point, the action from us would just be to solicit a motion to set up this committee and ask people to join, correct?
That's correct.
Counselors?
Sure. This is a motion to solicit citizen members of a transportation study committee to assist city staff and consultants with identified transportation projects.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. 4-0, that motion passes. Thank you, Bonnie. And I'm sure relatively quickly our staff and marketing and transportation will get together and we'll have an advertisement out there and get people signed up for that committee. I'm excited to see the turnout. That takes us to item 8H, approved selection of an insurance consultant. This sounds riveting.
Oh, it's going to be the most exciting thing we talk about tonight. John McClenny, Special Projects. You may remember we renewed our property and casualty insurance in June. And as often happens when you have a new set of eyes looking at things, which we had a new set of staff dealing with this process this year, it revealed several concerns about the process that came to our attention. We've been using the same broker for 18 years without any kind of a market review, and so we thought that was a concern that should be addressed. The systems that we use for loss data collection were primarily dependent on the knowledge, skills, and abilities of one employee and their relationship with the broker. And when that employee left, the ability to report that loss data in the way the insurance companies were expecting it left with them. We thought that that's something that ought to be addressed so that it's not employee dependent. The replacement costs for our city assets, water treatment plant, sewer treatment plant, big things, we're not entirely sure that those have been valued correctly. In fact, we're fairly sure that they haven't been. And we're also not entirely sure what assets need to be valued and insured, so we want to take a better look at that issue. We also have the potential for double coverage on some assets, and in going through this process, we've learned that if you have two insurance companies covering the same thing, rather than it just getting paid when it's time to get paid, you wind up with an argument between two insurance companies as to who's responsible for it. We really don't have a comprehensive risk management program as a city. We have bits and pieces here and there, but we don't have anything that's comprehensive and coordinated, and we thought it was important to take a look at that. And then we also don't have any expertise with regards to insurance and risk management on staff, not the kind that we're looking for in terms of a comprehensive program. So we put out a request for qualifications in July, and the evaluation process, we selected USI. We have an expectation of significantly more robust service from USI than what we have asked for in the past. We're going to work with them as our partner in a full-blown risk management program, reevaluation of our exposure issues, especially with regards to valuation of our assets and making sure that those coverages are correct. And then we, as part of the request for qualifications, we asked for a fee-based proposal rather than commission-based. So USI will be paid based on the service they provide to us, working for us, as opposed to being paid based on how much insurance they sell us, so that separates that, which we felt was a bit of a conflict of interest in our past relationship. So I'm going to introduce Ray Butler from USI to talk to the council, and then we, together, along with Christy Looper and Melissa Reams, who also helped with this process, will try to answer the council's questions, and then I will make staff's recommendations. So, Ray?
Thanks, John. Can you guys hear me all right? Well, thank you for your time this evening. As John mentioned, my name is Ray Butler. I'm a representative of USI, and I work out of our Dallas office. For those of you who aren't familiar with our firm, we are an insurance brokerage and risk management consulting firm. Most of our business comes from placing insurance in the marketplace for clients of our own, but a large part of our business is actually acting as a third-party risk management consultant. So understanding the due diligence and the lengthy process the interview committee went through during the RFQ, I'm really happy to be standing in front of you as the recommended broker. What I want to do is take a couple minutes and just introduce you to our way of thinking at USI versus the traditional brokerage model, so you guys can have a little bit of insight as to why the decision was made to go with USI versus another firm. So at USI, the overall prevailing theme we have is dedicated to achieving the best financial outcome for our clients while also delivering unparalleled value to them and unparalleled customer service. Customer service is a big thing to me. Our goals as a brokerage firm are fivefold. The first one is really to provide enhanced decision-making ability to our clients, and that's really what the rest of our processes stem from. The second is reduce and mitigate costs over time. The third is to improve margin and cash flows for the city and the rest of our clients. The fourth is to protect your guys' balance sheet in the best way possible. And lastly, culminating, is really creating the best overall return on your risk capital spend on an annual basis. And I know insurance is probably the most fun thing you guys talk about all the time. But when you guys think insurance, you probably think of your personal home and auto insurance and really kind of feel held at the mercy of the marketplace and really the numbers they provide to you. And the way I relate to that is the mailman metaphor, right? So you guys are the client, you hand your agent or broker the information they request, and they really just do this. And they hand it off to a carrier. The carrier does all their algorithms and actuarial work, and they spit out a number, and your broker and agent comes up and puts the numbers in front of you and says, all right, here's what we got. Which one do you want to go with, right? So not really beneficial in terms of driving financial impact in the best way possible. The way USI has strategically aligned ourselves shifts that process and that dynamic and takes the power out of the carrier's hands and puts it back into the buyer's hands. And expanding on that a little bit, really what we've done is instead of marketing USI on TV or on billboards or wherever, what we've done is we've taken our revenue and heavily invested back into our company. And we've invested in our proprietary technology platform, which we call the Omni. We've invested in our industry experts. So we've hired lawyers, carrier reps, underwriters, environmental experts, claims experts, and we've brought all of those experts in-house, and we house them in each one of our offices across the country. Now, the cool thing about that is being up to date on our tech platform, all of our experts are networked across the country. So if something can be applied in California or New York, here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, we can grab those solutions and apply them directly to your risk management program here in Stillwater, which is very beneficial for you guys. But overall, what that allows us to do is right size and structure the most optimized risk management and insurance program possible for you by leveraging our analytics in the marketplace and providing you guys with the decision-making insight into really what your options are. You know, without understanding the financial impact to your balance sheet or how a program is going to respond, there's really no benefit to that. And the traditional model is based on scattering the marketplace and bringing back quotes that really don't have terms and conditions that are beneficial to the city's exposures. By taking a targeted approach and leveraging our in-house analytics and pre-underwriting the program in-house, we know what the numbers are supposed to be. We know what terms and conditions to get you guys that are really going to impact you in the most positive way. And then finding a risk trading partner or carrier in this regard and creating a partnership over multiple years. And so understanding that, and really, we believe that USI is the best broker of choice for the city. So with that being said, if you guys have any questions of me, I'd be more than happy to answer those.
Counselors?
So just so I'm clear on this, so the traditional model, like you said, you go to your broker and say, this is the coverage I need. They say, okay, here are the five carriers that I've gotten quotes from. They give you a quote, done, right? So your approach is as the third party broker is you will come up with a risk evaluation, a risk mitigation plan, and then you come up with a number on what you think is appropriate based on that plan, and then go out and shop the market? Is that kind of the idea here?
Yeah, so whenever we get the information, instead of turning around and providing it to a carrier, what we do is we take that information in-house and pre-underwrite it, and we really compare it across the country. So we have 150 offices across the country. We're a very substantial firm, and what it allows us to do is it allows us to take your exposures as a city and benchmark them across similar cities and public sector clients across the entire country. And that really kind of establishes a baseline foundation. And then we go into your city specific numbers and really use our in-house actuarial team and our loss sensitive team and the like, and really put together and structure a program that's going to cover all of your exposures as a whole. And then based on that, we know that we can go out and instead of getting an off-the-shelf policy, we can go get tailored language within the terms and conditions for the same price and or cheaper, because we know what the marketplace is paying as a whole, and versus you guys paying a rate increase on an annual basis just because carriers like to push rate. You guys will be educated on here's what the numbers are and here's why they're that way. Now we're going to go find a trading partner to do business with us.
As somebody that deals with medical insurance, unfortunately, on a daily basis, the fact that a premium is negotiable just blows my mind.
Correct, right.
So I'm glad you cleared that up. Thank you.
Absolutely. A little bit different on the commercial side.
Apparently.
There's even a step to what you said, John. I go to my broker and say, this is what I need. And he says, here are the 5 choices. It's, you tell me what we need.
Correct. Yeah. And that's one of the, and I'm glad you brought that up, Vice Mayor. One of the things that is rampant in the brokerage community of insurance is really only being a conduit to the marketplace and only being there so you as the buyer can get insurance. What our plan is with the city and Stillwater Utilities Authority is not only being a conduit to the marketplace to obtain insurance, but it's also to act as that third-party risk manager. As John mentioned, there's really no risk management department or standing operating protocol in regards to risk management for the city currently. What we plan to do is act as that third-party risk manager and help the city in every step of the process, from nuts to bolts, A to Z, whatever you want to call it. You don't know insurance unless you work in insurance, and it's not Melissa or John's job to be insurance experts. They should rely on a firm such as USI to be that expert for them and tell them what they need and why they need it.
I do really appreciate that part of your process, giving us a process. It's something that we've talked a lot about this last year, developing those systems and those processes and making sure we have consultant support or outside support if we don't have that in-house, and helping us get those systems in place. It really helps things move more smoothly, I think. So I appreciate that part of your process very much.
I think it's very interesting that the switch in payment to an hourly as opposed to a commission. I mean, it really seems quite dramatic. Do we have a cap on hourly, or?
Yeah, so if, John, do you want to answer that question? I mean, I can answer the question to the best of my ability. Yeah, so the agreement between myself, USI, and the interview committee is after the high-level introduction to your current risk management program. We understand that this first year as your broker is going to be a little bit front-loaded heavy. And so because of that, we're asking for a fee of $110,000. And then in every consecutive year following, that fee will actually drop down because our workload will drop down. But yes, it will be capped. So short answer long.
Yeah, I did see that in the notes, but it was, it seems important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
Did you come up from Dallas?
Huh?
Did you come up from Dallas?
Yeah, I flew in. It was
flew into Stillwater?
Yeah, first time flying in.
The right answer.
Honestly, loved it.
It's great.
It's so much better than the 4-hour drive.
Yeah,
I mean, I've made the drive to and from multiple times. I'm an alum of OSU, and the city of Stillwater has a big place in my heart, so I try and find my way back here as much as I can.
How about that indoor baggage claim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would say with your question, and all of you hit on this, is that was one of our overriding concerns. Is you go to the marketplace and say, okay, here's what I need. We don't know what we need, and he's going to help us make sure that we get what we need. So staff's recommendation is that you authorize expenditure of up to $110,000 from the self-insurance fund to contract with USI upon completion of negotiations, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract.
Thank you, John. Tell me the difference between this and our what we did prior broker-wise. I mean, in terms of fee and service.
The commissions to the prior broker, and it was commission-based. It was based on the price of the insurance that we bought. It's roughly $60,000 different. USI is more expensive in that regard, but like I said earlier, we're asking them for a significantly more robust service rather than just us going to the broker and saying, okay, here's what we've got. They're going to help us figure out what the answer to that question is what do we need, and make sure that we have a comprehensive, and not just about insurance, but a comprehensive risk management program.
I assume the anticipation is that we'll save that $60,000 in the once we review the coverages we have and the risk management program.
Everything that they get for us insurance-wise is going to be included in that fee, but I will say that ultimately, if we find out that we are not well covered on some of our high-dollar items, the cost of the insurance itself could potentially go up. So that is something that could happen.
Okay.
John, I noticed in the notes that you had 6 responses to the RFQ.
Yes.
And what made USI stand out for you?
Their approach that Ray talked about, the fact that we were looking for very substantial customer service and someone that we felt confident would be a good partner going forward in terms of risk management. Customer service was a big issue for us, and USI really showed that they were going to deliver on that.
One question that I forgot to ask you, John. So you had said in your presentation that we think that our current assets are not valued correctly.
Yes.
Is the expectation that we are undervalued at this point or overvalued?
That we are undervalued.
That we are undervalued.
If you want to, I hesitate to give you a number, but it could be as much or more than $50 million undervalued.
Okay.
So
this is something we need
it's
to
a
kind
big
of get a
deal.
hold of.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Got a little more exciting there, didn't it, Mayor?
It was riveting.
Throwing out big numbers. Any further questions, councilors?
No.
Is there a motion?
Motion to authorize expenditure of up to $110,000 from the self-insurance fund for insurance services with USI upon satisfactory completion of contract negotiations, and authorize the city manager to sign the contract.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize this expenditure. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, that item is approved. Thanks, John. Thanks for being here, Ray. That takes us down to ordinances on second read. Ordinance 3447, an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2, City Council, Division 3, Ordinances, Resolution, Contracts, etc., to amend Section 2-84, Execution of Ordinances, Resolutions, and Agreements.
Motion to adopt ordinance number 3447.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the ordinance. Please vote. The vote of 4-0, that ordinance is adopted. And that's the ordinance that lets us authorize the city manager to sign that $110,000 contract.
It will be 30 days before they will authorize him to do that.
That cleans up that. That's the issue of that ordinance, so correct?
Yes, sir,
Yes.
it is.
All right. Down to item 11, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Request executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307B1 for the purpose of confidential communication regarding the employment, appointment, promotion, demotion, disciplining, or resignation of Stillwater City Manager Norman McNichol and Stillwater City Attorney John Dorman.
Thank you, John. Mr. McNichol.
Yes, sir. I have a couple items. Resident named Ruth recently left us a voicemail commending Charles and Russell from the Water Utilities Department for going above and beyond to resolve her issue. Charles and Russell represented the city's responsive standard. Thanks again for representing the city standards in action, and congratulations on your recognition.
Good deal.
Would also mention that we have 2 openings for the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment consists of 5 members. The Board of Adjustment is empowered by City Code to conduct hearings and render decisions on matters of appeals, variances, and special exceptions to the zoning ordinance. The board is considered to be quasi-judicial in that its decisions can only be overturned by district court. Term length is 3 years, so if that's interesting to you, I'd appreciate your... Finally, and because I'm not sure, is anybody else talking about Thursday the 27th?
What's Thursday the 27th?
Thursday the 27th, yes, next Thursday, is Vibrant Community Meeting.
23rd.
23rd. Oh, yes, I was.
23rd, if I could count. Yeah, and I'd hate to get out the wrong date. The 23rd at 7 p.m. right now for the Sherrar Center. The venue may be moved. Pretty exciting meeting that has sprung from a book, Building Vibrant Communities, and a gentleman that was involved in the rebuilding of a city in Florida, Pensacola, Florida, that had been hit by a hurricane, and there was really a remarkable transformation. This book has been used all over the United States to help cities find a course of direction and move forward with development. And one of the big rules involved in this is that the city is not to be directly involved. We will help provide numbers, resources in any way we can, but we're not going to be involved in trying to turn that direction so that the citizens come up with. And so far they have a lot of people registered to come, and they may need to move the venue, so stay tuned.
Yeah.
Thursday the 23rd, 7 p.m.
That's right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Stillwater's December sales and use tax collection exceeded budget projections by 6.12%. Total collection in December was $2.7 million. You can find that report at stillwater.org. I was just going to say, you know, 1 month, I seem to get the tax one a lot. And 1 month it's down, and next month it's up, and you know there are just so many problems with having to run an entire city or state on sales tax and use tax. Use tax is what comes from online, and in a short description. So it's up and down, hard to predict, and really an uncomfortable way to run things. But keep buying things, please.
I would just also point out that the collections in December are from sales in October, right, which is usually our best month. Yeah, we had a good homecoming that in October as well. So that's great, and it is, you know, being up 6% in October is a fantastic thing. But that's also
Who wants to bet what it'll be next month? Yeah. Maybe down.
Keep shopping locally.
Yeah. Next Monday, January 20th, city offices will be closed in observance of Martin Luther King Day. Residential customers will receive recycling and trash pickup as usual. However, there will be no yard waste pickup. Do you know that's one of the most frequently accessed items on the city's website? Yeah, you can always get that. Yeah, a holiday special, especially.
I don't know if somebody else has the announcement about Martin Luther King Day, but there's an event starts at the library. There's a little walk from the library to the community center, 6:30, right? I think 6 or 6:30 is the walk. 6:30. Starts at the library at 6:30, and then the community center. There's a program starting about 7, in observance of Martin Luther King Day. It's a great program. Been the last few years. I think Representative Trish Ranson is one of the speakers this year as well. So I would certainly encourage you all to take part in the city's Martin Luther King recognition and celebration.
It's really a fun thing, and the walk is nice. It's not very far, so even if it's cold, it's a great event.
It is. Councilor Wedlake.
Thank you, sir. To kind of lead in from Vice Mayor's comments about sales tax and how that may not be the best way to project revenue for a city, this week kicks off the city's budget week. Didn't we just do this, by the way? Each day, you'll see news from the city that breaks down the budget and tells you how to get involved. Please go to stillwater.org/budget for detailed explanations and opportunities to give your input. And we kind of talked about this earlier, but the Balancing Act is a great way to kind of play around with the budget yourself and send that information to us so that we can not only see if there are great ideas out there on how better to allocate funds, but to also see what's important to you as far as funding these projects. So stillwater.org/budget.
Excellent. Thank you. Councilor Jaloski.
Yes. Short-term rental owners are due for some housekeeping this new year. It's time to renew your short-term rental license for 2020 or to apply for one if you haven't yet. Applications are available online or at the Stillwater Municipal Building. To comply with city ordinance, short-term rental owners should apply for their license or renew their current license by January 31st, 2020.
Excellent. I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting last Friday with speakers from the Mid-South Bicycle Race who indicated that they're already either sold out or very close to sold out on hotel rooms that weekend.
Oh, so these
The
short-term
first weekend of
rentals
spring
might
break.
be
So if you're
in
thinking of
demand.
short-term renting your house out, that'd be a great week to do it. Make sure you get a permit from the city before you do. All right, here I have a reminder for you to keep an eye out for your postcard in the mail in the coming months, which you'll use to complete the 2020 census, as we spoke about earlier at the library, with the library. If you have questions or need help, the Stillwater Public Library is your census central. That is a phrase that we might need to, well, we're just gonna have to practice. Census Central. The library has been awarded a grant to fund the equipment, tools, and staff to make sure Stillwater gets an accurate count. We certainly appreciate that work, and please, please, please have your eye on the census and complete those forms and be counted. Yes, ma'am.
One more thing about the Quinn Studer event on Thursday, the 23rd. It's a free event, but they are asking for registration so that they can make sure they have a large enough venue. You can look online, Love Our Stillwater, Facebook, easy to find, or call one of us.
Yeah, and there's also on that Facebook page is one of the places to find it. I think they have a website maybe, but Love Our Stillwater on Facebook also has a link to a survey that they're conducting of just general questions about Stillwater and about your thoughts and what you'd like to see.
The survey results, the first survey results were finished.
Oh, they're done with that?
9th, and they may do another follow-up
never mind.
one. But they had over 400
excellent
responses, and
Good.
It's very interesting.
That's and great. It's Love Our STW.
Correct.
Right.
That's
if
right.
you're hunting for it on Facebook,
yes.
I think
Love Our STW.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that takes us to item 13, and at this point I will recess the Stillwater City Council meeting, and I will call to order the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting for January 13th, 2020. First item up is the consent docket. On the consent docket, we just have regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. The vote of 4-0, the consent docket is approved. Down to item 5, general orders. 5A, authorized contract amendment 2 with HDR for $758,120 in total project expenditures for the McElroy-Lewis Redbud Sewer Interceptor Project. Mr. Millis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before I start, I want to tell you that I'm encouraged by your enthusiasm for insurance, and that gives me hope for talking about sewers. So tonight I'd like to talk about
the sewers more often than we use the insurance.
Yes.
Well, hopefully anyway.
I'd like to talk about an amendment to a professional services agreement with HDR Incorporated for a trunk sewer line replacement project. On this slide shows the project area. It's north of McElroy, in between Boomer Road and the railroad tracks to the east, and north all the way to Redbud. This also illustrates the reason for the project. That overflow is not in the project area, but that's the kind of thing we're trying to eliminate with this project is sewer overflows. This slide shows the alignment that we've selected for the replacement sewer line, and also a list of work items required or covered under the amendment. Give you a sec to look at that. It comes down, we're starting at the bottom, runs along McElroy, crossing Boomer Lake, East Boomer Creek, the railroad tracks in front of the Elks Lodge, and then goes up Lewis, and then where Lewis turns into Tyler, it kind of goes cross country all the way up to almost to Redbud. The work involved will be making some modifications to the alignment at the north end, easement acquisition and easement purchases for 14 parcels, and also an analysis of the crossing of East Boomer Creek, where the sewer line will have an exposed crossing. This slide shows the strategic priority addressed by the project, and that's the creek crossing we've been talking about. The project will clean that up and make it less of an obstruction to the flow, but also more secure for the sewer line crossing. This slide shows the alternatives. It includes $186,000 for additional services from the consultant, $210,000 estimated for easement and possibly right-of-way purchases, and totaling, including the work that's already on contract, $758,000 authorization total, including contingency. Also, we have the alternatives on the slide here. And this slide has the recommendations, and I'd be glad to try to answer any questions before that.
Trustees?
So the change order is because we selected, because of the route alignment. Is that, I'm trying to understand. So we chose a route alignment that requires the additional expenditure. Is that?
Close. No, wherever we chose the alignment, but the the degree of additional services we would need, we didn't know until we chose the alignment.
Okay. Yeah.
And the type of construction and some things like that. So rather than guess at the front end, we said, well, let's study it first and then see how much we're going to need, and then go get that authorize those additional services.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I was trying to figure out the history too, Bill. This started in 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And was delayed.
Correct.
And then another amendment.
Yes, there was the first amendment was in 2018, and then this is amendment number 2.
Thank you.
So is this, at this point, approval of this amendment will get us to the point we've selected the route, we will acquire the right-of-way that we need to acquire, we've got the services ready. Where does it get us to? It doesn't get us through construction? Does this get us
yes,
to the end of the project?
the original contract includes design, so design is ongoing right now, but this adds the right-of-way acquisition to design. Okay. So the consultant will continue with design. It includes their services through bidding assistance and then construction management assistance.
Okay,
but not construction itself.
Do we have funds available? Have we already approved funding for actual construction of this project?
That was partially approved with the original project, but we'll need additional funding at the time to be appropriated and authorized at the time of construction.
Do you have anticipated construction costs for this at this point?
I do not. I don't have that with me.
So, I mean, we're going to end up $750,000 into design and acquisition at this point, right? I mean, that's just to get us to the point where we can
right.
That's
just to design it and manage the project and get ready for construction.
Where are these funds? Where are we taking the funds from?
From the wastewater fund. Or these funds actually are already appropriated for this amendment. Sorry, I was still thinking the construction funds, once the project is bid and we come to you for authorization, and appropriation would come from the wastewater fund.
Okay.
Bill, what's the timeline on that? Are we anticipating that those funds would need to be allocated for this budget year?
Not during...
I mean, for construction.
Not during the current fiscal year.
Okay.
We would anticipate that during FY21.
Okay.
Anything further, trustees? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve alternative 1. Approve staff execution of contract amendment 2 at a fee of $185,993 for the north alignment change, easement acquisition services and hydraulic analysis for a new total professional services agreement fee with HDR of $479,200. Authorize the funds in the amount of $210,000 for easement purchases and property damages, and authorize total project expenditures of $758,120, which includes a contingency of $68,920 to cover site investigation, design, permitting, bidding, construction, administration services, easement purchases, and property damage payments. That's the longest motion
That's
I've
a
ever
long
made.
It's like an
motion.
ordinance
That's the
title.
longest one I've ever done. I had to do that.
I'll do the hard work. Second.
So motion and a second, please vote. With a vote of 4-0, alternative 1 is approved. Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
you.
That takes us to the end of the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the Utilities Authority meeting. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting is adjourned. Now call to order the Stillwater Economic Development Authority meeting for January 13, 2020. On consent, we have a regular meeting minutes from January 6th. Please, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, the consent docket is approved. Drop down to item 7. Mr. Dorman.
Request an executive session pursuant to 25 OS subsection 307C11 for the purpose of conferring on matters pertaining to economic development, including the transfer of property, financing, or the creation of a proposal to entice a business to locate within the city of Stillwater, because public disclosure of the matter to be discussed would interfere with the development of products and services and would violate the confidentiality of the business.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? Reports from officers and boards, I mean? Okay, so we've got this one and we've got the city council one. I would suggest that we enter executive session as SEDA, and then when we're done with that, we'll adjourn and come back and enter as the council. Will that work? Is there a motion to enter executive session as Stillwater Economic Development Authority?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter executive session. Please vote. With a vote of 4-0, we'll now enter executive session as SEDA. Thank you all for being here.